Hello, everyone. Welcome to the community. I just thought at this stage it would be really useful and interesting for you and perhaps one or two really breakthrough pieces of training if you had a little sneak peek as to what's gone on behind the scenes for the last two and a half years in coming up with Big Point Player Blueprint. So it wasn't just a bright idea and something plucked out of thin air. A lot of thought and challenge went into this. And if I didn't have the passion, probably I might have given up somewhere along the line. So doctrine, first of all, probably invented by a great Prussian strategist, Karl von Clausewitz, and now taken on by militaries around the world. Doctrine really is a process or a guide to solve a complex problem and come up with a training regime to solve it. So our complex problem, we know. But just to state it, it is under moments of great emotional pressure at critical moments, how can we raise our game and win more tennis matches? And that's manifested probably into three types of situation. One is at the end of the match, 1, 2 or 3 closing out points where pressure is externally generated and you're shifted into a very strange and abnormal operating state. And normally your choices of that state are play the same level, probably play worse, but with this training, we're now going to play better than our best that got us to that situation. Then secondly, if we can shock and scare ourselves to generate the same thoughts and feelings, adrenaline, cortisone, dopamine, etc., through our system, we can now identify and seize those few game-changing, game-defining matches that occur sometime during the match. And lastly, we've probably all been there before. We are 5% below the scoreboard, below our opponent throughout the match. We're hanging in, but we've never been level or ahead. But we're still there towards the end. Can we then raise our game 10%? Now we're 5% better than our opponent and nick the match. The sweetest feeling. So that's our problem. That's how it's manifested. And I think until Big Point Blueprint came along, unless you had a Lendl or a McEnroe or a Becker in your corner, the only things you could do, I think, would be, apart from learn through painful experience over years and decades, and we don't want that, is to ask your coach. Now, your coach probably is very good technically and teaches you how to hit the ball and play better, but he probably doesn't teach you how to have victory. It's always struck me as a little odd that we would spend hundreds of hours, thousands of balls to teach us to get to the point of winning, but then nobody teaches us how to make that final step and win. You could ask a buddy, and the buddy might be insightful, but the chances are, no, they haven't been trained. You could scour the internet for hours and days and weeks, and I can tell you that's not going to help you. Or you can call your governing body. And there are a few people on the course, plus myself, that have asked the governing body who look at you blankly, so there's nobody to direct you to. And really, unless you're part of an elite squad, that's it, my son. So that's the problem. And then the next step to look at would be, well, what is the sort of scientific situation so we can analyze that? Then we can look for, well, who are there out there that are trained to excel in these moments? So all we need to do is model their training. And then the last thing is then how it's repurposed and structured for our training program. And then ask the acid question, well, will that solve the problem? Acid question. So we call it two sides of the same coin because it's the same situation, but how we look at it, how we put meaning to it and tell stories around it are very different. So it's, first of all, it's the classic caveman response to risk, danger, and fear. And it's fight or flight or freeze. But when we look into it just a little bit more, we find out that 5 of the biggest chemicals and subsidiary chemicals are flooding through your systems at the same time. It's called a huge neurochemical dump. That explains why mind, body, and senses get transported to a new place. And it's at that new place that you've never trained in, you're supposed to raise your game and win those matches. You can see why it's so difficult. So let's look. We've got things like adrenaline, cortisol, dopamine, endorphins, and others that all combine together to do these series of enormous benefits for you. One, your eyesight is never better. You can pick out objects. Everything's in slow-mo. With dopamine, there's magnificent pattern recognition. All your wires all your senses are wired up. You're ready to go. With adrenaline, that's jump-started your attention. And the endorphins just make you happy and without pain. So you can see with all this going on, it is nature's gift to you. You cannot be primed with more benefits to raise your game and fight at your very best. But if you don't know what's going on, and if you're not trained, you can create whatever story and meaning you want around it. But crudely, on one hand of the continuum would be risk, and the other hand would be excitement. Now, you don't want to get too excited because then you're into hyper-arousal and you'll play worse. So there's an optimum level of excitement. And clearly, risk would lead you to being flight or freeze, and excitement would lead you to fight. Even within fight, and you'll find out from our black belt 10th Dan expert in Kung Fu martial arts, 1,000 years discipline, is they are taught how to fight with ease, elegance, and freedom. If I don't catch my thoughts and feelings, and if I'm not getting my own way, I just tend to fight harder and harder. You know, I will not give in. I will fight harder. And that's often spills over into anger. That's not helpful. So along the way, from choker to big point player, you'll be whoever you describe yourselves to be. And you might just, as I speak now, just take 5 seconds out. Are you anxious, Mr. Anxious Nervous, cautious confident, bravado, arrogant, angry, quiet and diffident? You could be whoever you tell yourself to be under this enormous stimulus. So now let me ask you, having described who you are, how long you have been that person? Can you see how long you've been that person? 1 year, 5 years, 10? Or just shifted a teeny weeny amount? Now let me ask you, looking forward 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, unless you do something radically different and train, who will you be in the future? And the answer is exactly who you are today, and probably very similar to who you were in the past. So I'm assuming we don't want that. That's why we're on this training program. So now let me just say it's a choice. If you're blocked in the meaning and the story, you're blocked. That is who you'll be. But if you just give yourself some credit, just say to yourself, there is a possibility of me becoming a big point player. That's all. I'm not saying you will. We're just giving yourself an opening, if you like, an escape hatch from being blocked. A possibility of being a big point player. That's possibly attainable. Now all you need is the training, and follow the training, and becoming a big point player will be like night follows day. And it doesn't have to be hard work, must try harder, survive and struggle, incremental on the medium term. This can be elegant and quick. Aspiring. So, probably one final thing to say is that attaining a goal of being a big point player, I used to think was a subset of high performance. But the truth is that being a big point player is available for everybody, regardless of age, sex, and your capability level, against your peer group of equals in 50-50 matches. You can become the big point player. And then the last thing to say on a big point player is that once you're there, that it's not it. It's like doing karate and you get to a black belt and you go, amazing, that's it. And then somebody taps you on the shoulder to say, there are these things called dans, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dans, where you hone and hone your black belt status to get better and better and better. So that is also, an inspiring thing to look forward to in the future that you create and step into just by giving yourself permission to have the possibility of being a big point player. So now let's look into, well, who are big point players? Who excel under these neurochemical dump? Because all we need to do now is to find out what's their conscious and unconscious training and then model it. This is not invented from scratch. Success leaves clues. Just do what winners do. Be who winners are. Do who winners do. And then you'll get winners. So the first group obviously is the elites of the British military, the SAS, the elite of pilots, Top Gun fighter pilots, and the elite within extreme sports. Now, this genre of sports people have done more than any other single section of sports over the last 10 years to shift what is possible for human beings. The records, snow, rock, surf, ice, over the last 10 years have exploded. They bear no recognition to what they were 10 years ago. When we looked at all three, if you like, the being of all the three, of big point players, of winners, similar. Each have different areas of excellence. And what we've done is taken the best from the best before we repurposed it for tennis. So with the SES, we've actually repurposed a lot. We co-authored the SAS 8-step guide to winning at critical moments. And we'll find out in week 5 what that is. But really the story is, if the SAS were tennis players, how would they use their training to be big point players? And just to pick out a couple of things from that right now is that they are experts in analyzing a very specific combat situation, creating a bespoke drill, breaking that drill down into skills and sequence of skills, and then practicing and honing those skills under different circumstances, under night conditions and a whole variety of other obstacles, and learning from them, and then knitting those skills together into the sequence so that when the gun goes off, when it's green for go, the basics are done better than anybody else, and the whole sequence is done on autopilot without too much thinking. That's amazing, and that's what we brought into tennis. Top Gun fighter pilots, just look at their massive speed of movement and the massive complexity of information they need to process. So that can't be done mechanically. So they have perfected the art of armchair flying and visualizing, rehearsing their various Top Gun drills so that they can be done massively quickly, intuitively. We'll find out later, but a small point here is that mechanically we can process information at around about 50 bits per second. But our subconscious can process information at 2 million bits per second. So visualization immediately bump starts the subconscious processing of info. And lastly, extreme sports. Now, what they have done is to make a science and decode this used to be luck of being or in or out of the zone, what we now call in flow. So we've all been in flow. We've all done amazing things and looked at it and gone, wow, how did we do that? So now they've been able to re-engineer it, if you like, and then be able to trigger it at exactly the moment of time that they need to trigger it. Because all these three have another similarity, is that they have to raise their game under critical moments, because win or loss is not the score. Survival, life or death is. So we have now repurposed into Big Point Player Blueprint how to trigger getting into flow and hence raise your game at critical moments. Just talking through this, I hope you're as excited as I am. So now how does it all come together? Well, with the aid of some amazing people, Thomas Mensinger, owner of Field Tennis, worked closely with me and led the creation of the 5 major, what we would call combat situations, the duels that go on, that win or lose the vast majority of points. And then broke those, then created a drill for that situation, broke the drill down into a shot and sequence of shots, and then honed those shots and simulated risk and the match situation. That gets us into what we call unconscious competence rather than talent. And in the heat of the moment, in the fog of war, unconscious competence won't break down. And also America's former coach of the year, Robert Calbo, mentor to coaches that coach on the ATP Tour, added his insight into the emotional conditioning as well as the unconscious competence. So that's, 2 amazing people that repurposed all this training from the SAS Top Gun fighter pilots and extreme sports athletes into tennis. There is another principle of war that says bringing maximum power to bear at critical moments. And that implies levels of power. And that's exactly how we've structured Big Point Player Blueprint. 3 levels, and the first level is about self. And when you strip self down, it's about belief. A nebulous, elusive, vague concept of belief. And we've decoded how you can train belief, which is rock hard when it matters most. Kind of lots of people have belief until it's required, and then belief seems to disappear. Second level of training is what we call the 25-second moment. There are 25 seconds to get ready for the next point. And we would say there are 2 points going on. One is the rehearsed point, the first point, and the second point is the physical delivery of that point. So there's no reason why, with this training, you cannot win the first point and thereby give yourselves the very best chance to win the second point. And that's broken down to 3 things really to do in 25 seconds. 1 is about controlling the mind. 2 is about visualizing, rehearsing the next point in detail with great clarity of thought. And the 3rd is triggering, getting into flow, raising your game. And the 3rd level is the 5 match situations, the drills, the shots and sequence of shots, the simulation of risk, where unconscious competence takes together. In the heat of battle, you can trust your shots, play on autopilot with little thinking. So if we combine these 3 levels together, we do indeed bring maximum power to bear at critical moments. If you just improved in 1 level by 10%, that would be an advantage. If you improved in all 3 levels 10%, cumulative effect is really quite a significant competitive advantage. And I suspect many of you will improve by more than 5 to 10% in more than one of those areas. So this should give you, in its right, great confidence that you'll be trained your opponent will not be trained, and that gets vaguely into the area of unfair advantage. So that's it. That's the problem, how we set out to solve the problem. And I think logic says the training will solve the problem. We've put it into action and improved it like the SES would over the last 12 to 18 months. And the results consistently have been outstanding. A few people have done things and improved their game to extraordinary levels. And the testimonials will be on the website. So here we are. That's the doctrine. I'm really, really excited for the course to start. And we'll be seeing you shortly for week 1. Carpe diem.